A woman walked in and asked where she could see the Maoris. She's been told she could visit the reservations to see the endangered Maori, and she knew we kept them locked up for our safety. Okay, welcome to another episode, and in this episode we're going to look at some dumb stuff that Americans say about New Zealand. Now, I'm sorry if I sound like I'm ragging on Americans, but let's face it, Americans aren't known for their world geography, and while New Zealand is a pretty small, fairly insignificant place at the bottom of the world, some of the stuff they say is pretty damn crazy. Let's jump right into it. An American once asked me if we have laws in New Zealand, since we don't have the Constitution. Ah yes, America, inventor of baseball, that weird plastic cheese you squirt on your nachos, and apparently laws. I shouldn't have to point this out that countries do have laws. Some are better at enforcing their laws than others. Here in New Zealand, we are considered what some might say a developed country, and we hold the rule of law pretty well, generally. About 30 years ago, my grandmother was on a flight into Auckland with a young American guy. He was to be in New Zealand for a few days. His itinerary was land in Auckland, walk to Wellington, swim across to South Island, and walk to Christchurch, fly home. I mean, to be fair, it was pre-internet, but still, I hope that's bait. But I mean, I've heard some pretty crazy things from tourists coming to New Zealand before. Okay, let's look at leg one of his plan. Walk from Auckland to Wellington. I can't remember the distance off the top of my head. It's something like 600 or 700 kilometers between Auckland and Wellington. In freedom units, I think that's roughly about 400 miles. So yeah, good luck with that. Swim across to the South Island. Now, the body of water between the North and South Island is called the Cook Strait. It's a notoriously very rough piece of water. It's not a particularly long distance between the closest point of the North Island and the closest point of the South Island. However, it is still about 20 kilometers at its closest point. Yeah, a lot of people can't swim 200 meters, let alone 20 kilometers. So I'd like to see him try. Well, no, actually, I wouldn't want to see him try. You'd die. And then look at this. Walk to Christchurch. I presume he's going to walk from the point where he arrives from his swim across the Cook Strait to the South Island and walk down to Christchurch. Again, that's probably about, I don't know, it's about a 300 to 400 kilometer distance. Amazing stuff. How long does the ferry to Australia take? Yeah, this is a really, really common one. I'm sure many New Zealanders can relate to being asked this question whenever you travel overseas. Yeah, newsflash. I've said it before on this channel, and I can't remember the exact distance. I think it's something like 2,000 kilometers between Australia and New Zealand at their closest points. Give or take, I'm not sure. Look it up. Yeah, there's no ferry. And yeah, you can see here, a lot of people have been asked. This person replying saying, I've been asked that. I responded with, ferry? No, we use kayaks. Then sent them an article of some dude who actually did it and got in trouble on the way. To this day, I don't know if they ever learned the truth. Yeah, that's true. There have been people who have crossed it. But again, these are professional, I don't know, athletes, whatever. Another Kiwi says, when I worked in the USA, I paired up with the Aussie working there, and we had all the Americans half convinced that we get between the countries by running across the Tasman at low tide. Ooh, what's that accent? Fair enough question if you don't meet many Kiwis. Answer, I'm from New Zealand. They reply with, no, I don't think so. I think I've had a similar scenario in my travels before as well. But imagine that. Someone asks you where you're from and you answer them with where you're from and they don't believe you. You know where you're from. Had someone in the US ask me if we really had hobbits. I responded with yes, but their population was nearly decimated during the Hobbit Maori Wars. Got a head nod and an eyebrow lift in acknowledgement. The response to this is great too. Ah, yes, the Battle of Auckland. Oh, that's a really good one. Do people around the world actually think New Zealand has hobbits? I mean, how dumb do you have to be to watch a movie and think that that's real life? I mean, I get it if you're 5 years old, but... Almost 2 decades in the US. I'm assuming this is a Kiwi who's lived in the US for almost 2 decades. They've been asked, do you guys celebrate Thanksgiving? What language do you speak over there? If the seasons are backwards, do you celebrate Christmas in June? What? Oh, okay, I see what they mean. Do you guys have houses yet, or do you still live in those grass huts? Do you have, like, roads and things there? What about cars? Do you have cars? Is there a bridge to Australia? Oh, God, here we go. And after the last US election, so how do you all feel over there now that the president of the world has been decided? Jeez, I mean, what is it? naivety, the hubris of some Americans. And I want to reiterate, not all Americans. It's just America's a big country and there's a lot of you. And it just means there's proportionately a larger amount of stupid people. I've heard this one about celebrating Thanksgiving before. Likewise, I've heard Americans ask non-Americans, not just New Zealanders, do you celebrate the 4th of July? And I mean, if you have to ask that question as American, doesn't that call into question your understanding of the holiday itself? Just think for a second. But yeah, if the seasons are backwards, do you celebrate Christmas in June? Now, I have heard of some people, mostly migrants to New Zealand from the UK, do this thing in June, which is the middle of our winter here in New Zealand, have some sort of cold Christmas, because people from the UK associate Christmas with being cold and miserable, and they want to have that experience in New Zealand too. I mean, you can do what you want, but it's not Christmas, is it? I mean, June is just not Christmas. I quite like this one as well underneath it. When I lived in the US, I got asked, what's the weather like in New Zealand? Yeah, what, all of it? I also got a lot of, oh, New Zealand, cool. I've been to Australia, to which I would reply, neat. I've been to Canada. I've experienced this too. I went to North Carolina when I was quite young and just out of uni, and I remember buying a drink in a gas station over there, and the girl behind the counter asking, it's like, oh, that's an interesting accent. Where are you from? I said, I'm from New Zealand. She said, oh, right. I really want to go to Australia someday. And I'm like, cool. What am I supposed to say to that? I was working as a travel agent in downtown Auckland. Here's a few. Number 1, American guy who came in and was bewildered no one would sell him a ferry ticket from Auckland to Sydney. This again. It took me an hour and my manager to convince him we weren't the same country. The quickest, quotes, ferry to take him to Sydney was a cruise, and geography was perhaps something he needed. Number 2, woman walked in and asked where she could see the Maoris. Intense blank look. I suggested if she wanted to see like a public performance or something, we could send her to Rotorua or even the Auckland Museum shows. Nope, she's been told she could visit the reservations to see the endangered Maori. She'd done her research apparently, and she knew we kept them locked up for our safety. Christ. I called to one of my managers who is Ngāpuhi Iwi and let her educate. Iwi is basically a tribe. Please imagine me bewildered having to explain to my very clearly Maori boss that I needed help explaining that we do not lock up the Maori. We had a stiff drink afterwards. Yeah, you would need a stiff drink after that. Needless to say, something like 14-15% of New Zealand's population are Maori. Yeah, they're just like everybody else. I was in the South Island doing touristy things and struck up a conversation with a tourist from the American South who was similarly doing touristy things in the South Island. Upon hearing I was from the other island, he asked me for recommendations for things to do, and there I suggested the Waitomo Caves. Waitomo Caves are a really famous tourist attraction in New Zealand. They're in the North Island. They're these really cool, big, deep caves. You can go see glowworms and stuff in there. It's pretty cool. He was almost aggressively appalled at the suggestion he might enjoy the White Homo Caves and asked me what sort of a man I thought he was. This is brilliant. Oh god, the White Homo Caves. I guess you could, I guess it sounds a little bit like White Homo. White Homo, White Homo. The responses to this are quite good too. I have to say, with him on this one, you'd miss a whole rainbow of cocks if you go exclusively White Homo. White Homo Caves not for you? Try the Hooker Falls. Oh god, yeah, that's another one. That's a legitimate place also, the Hooker Falls. Yeah, this is a really good one. I really like this. I suppose, you know, if you really are just into white homosexual men, there are apps for that, I'm told. More random than anything else, but is the broccoli you get from the supermarket there edible? What? That is incredibly random. You know that food stuff, you know, broccoli, like, can you eat it over there? Nah, but we buy it anyway to throw in the trash once we get home, or else they might stop stocking it in the shop. I mean, this is just next level stupid. I just love the randomness of it more than anything. People in New Zealand die because they're an impoverished country without the luxuries of clean water everywhere and soaps. And soaps. I think they might be confusing us with somewhere else. Someone's replied to this and said, New Zealand is a developed country similar to Australia and the USA. And then someone else has said, ha ha ha, you win today's stupidest comment on the internet. I mean, that's pretty stupid. I don't know where they think New Zealand is, but we do have clean water and soap. This next one is titled, I'm American, I don't need to know where it is. So it looks like someone watched a TikTok of some TikToker from New Zealand singing a song, I think. Some American has commented here, I don't know where New Zealand is, but I enjoy your content and your vibe, Mr. New Zealander. To which someone replies, you don't know where New Zealand is? Person then replies to that and says, I'm American. It's not that I couldn't learn, but rather respectfully, I don't need to know where it is. Also, while typing, I saw you're the song guy and not a random person. Sending good vibes. Oh, well, that's nice, but the arrogance? I'm American. I don't need to know where it is. Jeez. Wouldn't you be at least a little bit curious about content you're watching from some other country? If you really like this content like you apparently do, and you realize it's from New Zealand, wouldn't you, and if you didn't know that, wouldn't you at least be slightly curious and look New Zealand up? Or how about this one? New Zealand is not America. I don't know what point they're trying to make there. There's only 5 million people in the size of a country in the middle of the ocean that is the same size of Colorado. Government is and can be ran differently because they're not a world power. Never fought in a world war, never defended another country from tyranny or had to retaliate against a country or movement because their own rights were being taken. Quit comparing apples to oranges. Now, I don't know what the conversation around this was that sparked this response, but correct, New Zealand is not America. America is America. There is only 5 million people in the size of the country in the middle of the ocean. That is the same size as Colorado. That's true. We've got just over 5 million people. And I do believe we are roughly the same size in area and maybe population to Colorado in the US. I don't know what they're going on about. The government is and can be ran differently. Here we go. Never fought in a world war. Well, there's this little thing called the internet. Google, maybe you've heard of it. I hate to think what all these war memorials around New Zealand towns are all about then, if we've never fought in a world war before. Never defended another country from tyranny. Well, again, look this up. Like I said, we do have a lot of war memorials around New Zealand towns to commemorate all of the New Zealanders who died defending other countries. Now, we've been fortunate enough to have not been attacked ourselves. But as far as I know, neither was the USA in either world war. Like the US, we sent out mostly men and women too to go and fight and defend other countries, to remove tyranny and fight for the rights of the countries that were being invaded. So that was good. Seems a little bit of education can go a long way, or just not even education, just a little bit of Googling. Had a guy yell at me about how it was unconstitutional for Jacinda to ban guns because it was against the Second Amendment. I don't know, man. The crazy thing about the Constitution of the United States is that it only applies to the United States, of which New Zealand is not. Yeah, funny that. The laws of your country only apply to your country. A bit like when Americans ask New Zealanders here or any other country, do we have the 4th of July? Well, yes, we have the 4th of July. It comes after the 3rd of July. But no, it's not a celebration. It doesn't mean anything in New Zealand. It's got no relevance here. Here's a good one from stalwart New Zealand politician Winston Peters back when he was Deputy Prime Minister under Jacinda Ardern's government days. Brutal line from New Zealand's Deputy PM. We've got someone who obviously got an education in America. So it looks like Winston Peters was giving a press conference and he shut down some sort of COVID denier, I guess, who was trying to ask him some questions. But there's an interesting comment here from an American commenter who says, sure, but until New Zealand's educational system produces the capability to deliver nuclear-tipped ICBMs, I'm afraid I can't ascribe it or New Zealand much importance. And presumably a New Zealander replies with, because we should all aspire to be like North Korea. I'm quite worried about this commenter for many reasons. I don't know why you'd consider the only metric of a country's importance is whether or not they can produce nuclear-tipped ICBMs. Yeah. Some crackpot countries out there have nuclear weapons. I visited America last year. When someone found out I was a Kiwi, the first thing they said was, oh wow, what month is it over there? I just looked at them in shock, not knowing what to say. And there's a good reply to that, Churvember. Remember that one? I saw an American lady videoing the 3D movie at Te Papa. Te Papa is the National Museum here in New Zealand. It's in Wellington. And I guess they've got a 3D movie in one of the exhibits. I don't know, I haven't been there for a while. That's not so bad, but she was holding a set of 3D glasses in front of the camera lens as she did it so she could capture the full 3D effect to show the folks back home. Yes, that's how 3D works. With sharp wits like that, I'm amazed she actually found New Zealand on a map in order to get here in the first place. Time for some rugby chat. There's one thing New Zealanders love, it's some rugby talk. Here's an American Redditor's view on rugby though. Everyone dissing the NFL, but don't realise if America has their own national rugby team, we'd wipe the floors. Next up, we have someone who left a YouTube comment about things. The Beatles actually sold their music to America because they got arrested for singing their songs to Europeans. This is insanity. course the Beatles moved to America. Hell, the Beatles never went back to England where they were born because there was a warrant out for their arrest. The chances of foreigners being kidnapped and killed or sold into slavery or sex slavery include most of South America, France, Romania, Turkey, Hungary, Ukraine, China, nearly 100% of Africa, New Zealand, okay, and a few others. Another big reason why Americans don't leave America is, why would we? For refusing to sell European Kinder eggs, which if Europeans had a brain, would have looked at Americans and said, wow, this is stupid and dangerous, but... cool story. Was at a hairdresser in New York State. Hairdresser cheerfully told me all about her sister who went on a volunteer mission to help the local villagers build houses in New Zealand. She got very embarrassed when I responded that, while we could certainly do with more houses given the current shortage, I suspected she may have been thinking of Papua New Guinea. Same trip, mentioned to a shop clerk that I was from New Zealand. He asked me how things were back home, with the war and everything. Asked for clarification, and it turned out he thought New Zealand was a neighbour of Ukraine. There's a lot to unpack in this one. That hairdresser talking about her sister going to New Zealand to build more houses. Quite right, we do need more houses in New Zealand. Just look at the prices of real estate in this country. But yeah, I think her sister may have had her wires crossed about where she actually went. And the apparent war in Ukraine, which devastates New Zealand also. Not sure what to say about that, but when we look at this next example, it may give us a bit of a better understanding about Americans' knowledge of geography. A survey on where Americans think Ukraine is located. Jesus Christ. One, it's exceptionally worrying the number of Americans surveyed actually think Ukraine is somewhere in the United States. Even more concerning is that it's in the middle of the Southern Ocean, according to this dot here, and one dot that shows it's in the upper North Island of New Zealand. So, yeah. What can I say? Keep sending us that military aid, USA. What if the United States soft annexed Australia/Canada/New Zealand by unilaterally granting everyone in them American citizenship? Like, no talks, no treaties, just, you're all American now, welcome. What are they gonna do? Say no? We've talked about this before on this channel. If you haven't seen the video where American commentator Peter Boghossian is in New Zealand and he's asking New Zealanders on the street, would they agree to become the 51st state of the United States? It's pretty interesting. It's just a thought experiment. There's no chance in hell that's ever going to happen. But the arrogance of some people, I know I'm well aware that a lot of Americans like to think that they are the greatest country in the world, the greatest country that's ever existed, and they think that every other country's people wants to be an American. And the idea that people in other countries just don't seems to confuse them. Amanda Palmer tweeted once, just walked into a coffee shop here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and everybody behind the counter, not really knowing me, but knowing I was American, erupted in spontaneous applause. Yeah, because that really happened. Who is Amanda Palmer? Let's have a look. Amanda Palmer, American singer and songwriter. Don't recognize her. Never heard of her before. What acts is she associated with? The Dresden Dolls. I've heard that name. I've only heard the name. I couldn't tell you any of their songs. Yeah, nice one, Amanda. I think judging by your massive delusions of grandeur, you need to check yourself into a psych ward. From a subreddit called Damn That's Interesting. One American commenter wrote, name a country that flew before the US. US aviation history equals the bulk of aviation history. I'm not sure where you were taught that though. While this one doesn't particularly reference New Zealand, I did read further down in the comments to this post that someone actually talks about New Zealand and the first powered flight that many people argue actually happened in South Canterbury in New Zealand. If you've never heard of this before, check out the video on this channel where I mention it. An American once asked me where South Africa is. Come on now, the answer's in the question. Americans' geography will never cease to disappoint me. Well, actually it does disappoint me, but in terms of producing us with great content, they just keep giving. Next up, we have a post on Reddit from what appears to be a real American, just judging from his profile picture. The thread is titled, let's see how far your communist country, brackets New Zealand, can run off all the money you stole. Haha, nice, let's withdraw troops from your country and see how you can balance the GDP without our military support. Let's see how far your communist country can run off all the money you stole and how much inflation fucks your ass with that super high minimum wage. Also, let's see how much y'all can innovate and create new inventions with a system that normalizes mediocrity to such a degree. Good luck. Trump 2020. What is the American military presence in New Zealand? I believe it's Fred from Montana. He's on holiday here in Christchurch at the moment. So Fred, get the f*** out. Sorry, Fred. Or how about this one? New Zealand is a tiny island with like 100 people living on it that people only know exists because of Lord of the Rings. Well, there's some truth about that. There are a lot of people around the world whose knowledge of New Zealand solely comes from the Lord of the Rings movies. The USA is the most important and most diverse country in the entire world. Shutting off travel actually has consequences when 90% of your population isn't goat farmers. Wrong domesticated animals, sheep farmers, get it right. And there's actually like a bit more than 100 people living here, and even more than one island. Which brings us to perhaps one of the best/craziest examples of Americans who seem to know nothing about New Zealand, despite being a travel writer. Susie Strutner, who writes for the Huffington Post, wrote an entire article about traveling to New Zealand, although upon reading the article, it's not really clear whether or not she actually came to New Zealand. But she titled it, New Zealand's Other Island is a Dazzling Slice of Paradise. The Other Island. Who knew? New Zealand has another island? She writes, if you travel mostly in the Northern Hemisphere, then you may have always imagined New Zealand as one singular island. Not sure about that. People who actually paid attention in class probably realized that New Zealand, and looked at a map once, that's if they can find a map with us on it, quickly saw that New Zealand has two main islands. Yet savvy travelers know the country actually consists of two main islands, the North and the South. Well done, Susie. New Zealand's North Island is a hub for Māori culture, a hotspot for scuba divers, and home to the cosmopolitan cities of Auckland and Wellington. But as it turns out, New Zealand's sensationally beautiful and significantly less popular South Island is a sprawling, rugged paradise many tourists have shockingly failed to appreciate. Are you mental? While most international flights into New Zealand arrive into Auckland on the North Island, it's very, very common for many, if not most tourists who arrive into New Zealand to quickly hop on a flight to the South Island, where they spend most of their time traveling. Just look at any travel guide about New Zealand, any sort of travel brochure or video or TV show about people who've traveled here. Most of the scenery they show you and talk about, it's always in the South Island. It is a massive tourist hotspot. I wonder if Susie Strutner still has a job travel writing after this. If we scroll down, she's actually written a correction later on saying a previous version of this post included a quote about East Cape, a place we stated was on the South Island. In fact, East Cape is located on North Island. Language has also been amended to avoid the implication that New Zealand and Australia are not separate countries. Oh god. Not only did she only just apparently find out that New Zealand has two main islands, she did that whole thing again of thinking that Australia and New Zealand are just one country. Good job, Susie Strutner and HuffPost. What about this news item about a powerful moment New Zealand firefighters honor 9/11 first responders with a stirring haka on the 18th anniversary of the terrorist attack that claimed 2,977 lives? To which an American commenter writes, class act from our Aussie friends. Is that just bait? Is he trolling? Nowhere in the entire headline or the sub-headline does it ever say Australia anywhere. It says New Zealand twice, talks about the event being held in Auckland, also mentions how firefighters perform the Maori tradition. What is it with a lot of people around the world? Even if you never say Australia and you actually say New Zealand several times, they will still reply to you with some sort of reference to Australia. I've got a cousin in the UK who does that. He knows I'm from New Zealand. He loves rugby. I love rugby. We often talk about rugby when we do meet each other. On many occasions, we've talked about rugby matches between the All Blacks and various UK teams. And yet he will still proceed to ask me minutes later, oh, so do they have XYZ in Australia? I don't know what to say anymore. Well, if you don't know what to say anymore, why not check out this video